Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Follow the Omens. I'm joined in studio today by a very special guest, Natasha Filipov, who is doing so many things early on in her career. She's currently in a rotation program for a large pharmaceutical company, but she's also the host of the podcast This Blonde Means Business, which she started back at Drexel University, where we first met. She's a former Philadelphia Eagles cheerleader, a current dance instructor, a professional model. I feel like I'm missing some things here because she's just doing so much, but Natasha, thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to be with us here today.
Very kind introduction. Thank you so much, Chris. Thanks for having me, and I'm very excited to be here.
Well, we first connected when I believe I had been out of school. You were still in school. It was during COVID. I was doing a different podcast, and we wanted to make something happen. I'd reached out to you about even a year ago for this specific podcast, so I'm happy you were finally here and able to talk about the book, The Alchemist. And so for you, right, I want to get the introduction, and I ask every guest when they first come on, how did you first come across the book?
Yeah.
And what was your initial first impression when you read it?
Yeah, so I actually don't like reading. Like cue, edit that sound in. I wanted to get more into reading. It was like one of those, I think it was probably around COVID when the 75 hard challenge was becoming very popular and people were like, getting into self-help books. And this book had come up like constantly on TikTok and on social media for me. I'd heard of it. And it was one of those that I never read. And I was like, you know what? I'm definitely going to buy it. It's a short book, so I'm not going to torture myself starting out reading, like something that is super heady. This should be a light read that's easy. And I started reading it on the beach, which is my favorite place to read because I'm just undisturbed. And I think that there's less distraction and I'm in the zone and I can kind of just relax and really get into the story. So, read it fairly quickly and really vibed with it. It's definitely my type of book. In the sense that I don't think it's actually like, although it is a piece of classic literature, I think it's more of a self-help book. And that's definitely the types of, pieces that I'll pick up to kind of digest. Because I think at the end of the day, like if I'm reading, unless I'm like, again, reading like for a trash read for the purpose of being mindless, I want something that is going to help me, benefit me, or stick with me, even if it's like one sentence from the entire book that I carry with me subconsciously throughout my life. And there's so many lessons in this book that did that were not just like one sentence, that are ideas and themes that are really important for everybody. So yeah.
Well, I love how you said it was beach reading for you at first. I can imagine like hearing the waves crash in down the Jersey Shore, taking a read to this. But for you, so many great quotes in this book, right?
A ton.
What's like a quote that stuck out for you the first time that really resonated with you?
I'll have to reference it exactly, but it's something to the point of, without dreams or without realizing your personal legend, like that is what makes life interesting. And it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes that I had found like years and years ago that always stuck with me. And it's like, challenges or successes are what make life interesting, but challenges are what make life interesting. Overcoming them is what makes life beautiful, is the quotation, although I really butchered it there. And, I'd always thought of that. Like whenever like I went through a time in my life that was like difficult or something didn't work out as I had intended, like if life were to be prescribed and if the things that we want in our life were to happen the way in which we want them to happen, like how boring would life be? Mm-hmm. Like I think that like the quest of like, your personal legend and mission and finding kind of what is meant for you is the fun part of life. And I am like definitely somebody who struggles with that. Like all of these roles that you mentioned I do, like I'm a constant overachiever and like I like to try things on. Like I don't know what is meant for me. Like I don't know what my path is. And I feel like 2 years ago I'd be sitting here trying to tell you otherwise. Mm. And now I'm like, I don't know. And I go with the flow and I'm with a large pharma company now. Will I be in 2 years? I don't know. Like I like to professionally model, but like, am I going to do that forever? Probably not. Like there's just certain things that I think are meant for us in the time they're meant for us. And I think the rest of our time on earth is really meant to figure out like what the journey is. And I think a lot of it too is like, Santiago in the book bumping into other people and finding love when you're not really intending on finding love. And like, I know we'll dive deeper into this, but there's so many themes that just resonate with me and that are just so universal. And I think that's why the book is so universal and so popularized too.
You took it in so many great directions. There are a lot of different jumping off points, but since you mentioned the personal legend, I do want to ask you, I ask this for every guest, right? As you look back on who you were as a kid, maybe a teenager, or even young adult, what was your conception of your personal legend? I know a lot of people always ask you, oh, you must have always wanted to be an Eagles cheerleader. And you've said it in the past, that's not the case.
No.
So like, as you look back, what was that initial concept as you were a kid of your personal legend and what you wanted to pursue?
That's a really interesting question. I appreciate it. So I was actually just having this conversation with my cousin the other day, ironically enough. I'm at this point in my life, I'm 24, I'm turning 25 next month. And I feel like that's, kind of prompting me to have this quarter life crisis, which sounds so funny and ridiculous because like I realize that in the grand scheme of things, I am very young. But it's this maturity and this change of kind of environment where I'm realizing that we do have a finite time to do what we want with our life, And so for me, like, to answer your question, when I was young, I would always say like, oh, I want to be famous. And my mom, and I grew up in the arts. I was a dancer since the time I was 2 years old. I grew up in theater. I did show choir. Like, I loved, even when I wasn't in like the necessarily performing arts roles, like, being in high school, I was always like the NHS, whatever, president or whatever role I was, like speaking and being outward and presenting. And I love that type of role. And my mom would always correct me, like being very young. She's like, Natasha, like, don't say that. There's infamous and that's bad. And you don't want to be infamous. Like she would like make it a point to have me identify like what, fame is not necessarily like this great accolade necessarily. And so as I matured, I think what it became for me and how my personal legend evolved, but didn't change, is that I think what I still aspire to have is a platform, right? To inspire, to connect, to perform, to highlight others. And I think like in a very small way, I like to say it's like a microcosm of what I hope to do. That's what I've done with creating this Blonde Means business, which I, to your point, started in college as a means of expression for myself. Being an NFL cheerleader, going to business school, just trying to find out who I was and discover more of myself, and having all the societal pressure and other, external party pressure from individuals saying that I could only be one thing or I could only do one thing, or that I was labeled as one thing, and me wanting to constantly prove people wrong. And constantly, I feel like almost exemplify that juxtaposition, right? Like that I'm a blonde, but I'm also intelligent, or that I, am talented, but I can also be like, the other thing on the other day of the week. Like you're not exclusive, all these different parts of yourself, and they're all part of your personal legend. Like they're all part of, I think, what you're meant to do. And so how do you kind of embody that at all points in times, not just, wearing the suit and being the professional 9 to 5, or, shaking your butt and like having fun on the weekend, like, dancing, like training since I was 2, being talented in that way. Like that doesn't make me less of a professional. And so like, that's what I still hope to do with the platform, like prove that people can have their personal stories and personal legends, give them an opportunity to share that and inspire other people. Because I think at the end of the day, like that connectivity is what inspires me and has inspired me.
I want to go back to the root too, because I know you said you've been in the arts and the creative side of things since you were little. Take me back to the 4th grade. You're the lead role in The Wiz as the Scarecrow, right? So you're with a bunch of 7th and 8th graders. So from a young age, right, you're clearly standing out. I'm sure there was a lot of resentments and a lot of people saying you shouldn't have that role yet. So share with me those experiences early on in that role.
Yeah, there was, and I think like there's certain moments in time in my life that I look back. And I'm like saying this as if I'm like, I'm at the end of my life, but that have been real turning points for me, that have been real moments of like, oh, this is proving that I'm on the right path, or that I'm believing in myself enough to know that I'm capable of doing more or continuing on or believing in myself, And I think like, again, not to compare or jump right into the book, but like that's what Santiago does at certain points in the book too, right? Like he kind of wavers in, oh, do I go to the pyramids or do I pursue what I believe is my personal legend? And every time like there is like, again, like a good sign or favorability that prompts him to continue going. And these moments for me, like one in 4th grade, getting the role of, that was like my first ever play. And so I auditioned. I don't even know what I sang. I probably sang like Happy Birthday because I probably didn't even know what sheet music to pick or like, run through. That was a point where I was like, oh, like somebody saw something in me that validates that I am talented or that I am capable or worthy. Same thing with Eagles. I went out for the Eagles on my first try. I only auditioned for the Philadelphia Eagles because I had got told by one of my dance team captains to tone it down on the sidelines of the Drexel dance team court, in college. And I was like, no, like if I don't fit in here, then I don't fit in here. I'm not going to, turn my volume down or turn down my talent level or my passion because you're saying that I don't fit here. I'm going to go find somewhere where I fit. And that's my whole, like, that's what I believe in life in general. Same thing with like companies and different professional roles and even personal situations. But that was another point where like I did not think that I was going to necessarily make the team. You know, I was kind of, and that was a real advantage for me, I think, in auditioning, was like being 20 years old and having that idea of like, you know, if it's meant to happen, if it's meant to work out, it will. Like, I will try to be healthy, but I'm not going to starve myself and change the way that I look to fit anyone's whatever. I'm not going to give an interview answer that they want to hear. I'm going to be myself and share what's important to me and what my values are. And if that aligns with them, great. And if not, not. Ended up making the team on my first try. I always say to this day, I would not have went back and auditioned again because it was a tough process. You know, it really was. Like, you expose yourself, and this is artists and creatives in general, to the highest level of scrutiny. Like, I always say, I will always admire creative people, performers, the most, because what we do is literally the most vulnerable thing. We expose ourselves to opinions constantly, and that's really hard. And so, you know, made it on the first, and that was like, again, like another moment of in time in my life where I was like, you know what, like, I am capable, I am worthy, and I can continue. Not that you need that externally, but I think what that does is it really bolsters what you believe of yourself. And so, yeah, The Wiz was probably the first moment of that in my life, when I was the Scarecrow in The Wiz. And they cut my song, by the way, too. Like, the key for the song was like way too high, and I was in the 4th grade. And I remember it was like the final dress rehearsal, and the woman, I think she was the director, or maybe it was the music director, maybe it was both of them. I remember them just being like, yeah, you know, I think this show's too long anyway. Like, let's just cut this song. So I didn't even get my own song, but I still was the lead, so it's fine.
I forget the exact quote in The Alchemist. There's a quote though about beginner's luck, right? And beginner's luck being what leads somebody on a journey to then test their skills. So I see that in your story, and it's awesome too. I love how grounded we are right here, because the next question I was going to ask you, right, was going to be about that process, trying out for the Eagles. And you've said in the past it was a 4-month process. That's a lot of feedback. Right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of ups and downs. Take me through some of the highlights and the lowlights of that experience.
Yeah, it was great. It was great, but it was really tough. I say great because I think tough can still be fantastic because you learn a lot. I learned a lot about myself, you know. First of all, there's a lot behind the scenes people don't realize. Like, you know, you see the moments that are like waving on the stage, making the team, which are fantastic. But like the behind the scenes is like your fingertips are glued together because you're stoning, you know, $400 worth of Swarovski rhinestones that you bought from your local AC Moore, you know, and Michael's, and you're recruiting your mom to do it and your aunt to come over and help you. And then you stone 400 of these rhinestones onto a costume, and then you take bra, sports bra, whatever. And then you take the costume in and you audition with it, and they go, we don't like that color on you. So then you have to go to the store and you have to buy like another you know, like it's like these little like things or moments. It was a lot of work, that plus the practices, plus like the hair extensions and the spray tans. Like, people don't realize like that is a financial investment. That is a physical investment in your body that you're training. And you're eating really properly and you're trying to sleep, but also like you have a lot of stress and anxiety around that process because you're exposed to so much criticism and critique. I remember the director pulled me aside at the workshop, which is like the first initial step when you want to go and you learn the routines and you kind of interact, you catch the vibe. It's not officially an audition, but you know, whenever you show up somewhere, you're being auditioned, right? Like, you're being judged and critiqued. And she pulled me aside after I performed in a group. And she said to me, you know, like, is this your first time auditioning? You know, like you caught our attention. I think you should definitely focus on fitness because we would hate for that to hold you back. Another year, you know, like come back for the audition and tone it up. And, I mean, I definitely did, but, you know, hearing that as like an 18-year-old, you're naturally going to think there's something wrong with you, even if it's not necessarily a criticism. So I kind of had to like callous my brain almost to just get through what I needed to get through. But it was a tough process. Like the last final audition rehearsal, like I remember I prepared everything so much and everything was critiqued. Like, they didn't like my swimsuit. They didn't like my walk. They didn't like my dress, you know, that like my mom and I had went and picked out and bought all new things and loved. And, you know, like it was one of those, I was like, I went home and I remember I was at Drexel at the time, but I'm from South Jersey, and I got in my car and my body like went on autopilot. Like, you know, I'm a 16-year-old or 17-year-old. And I just drove my car right over the Ben Franklin Bridge and I crawled into my mom's bed and I just started sobbing because it was like a lot to take. But the people I met were some of the most genuine, kind, caring. And I don't think you can say this about every year. I don't think you can say this about every group of people. But just personally, the experience I had, these women, and it was all women at the time that I had auditioned, I know times have changed now, were some of the most inspirational, dedicated, aspirational, ambitious, motivational, kind people that I've ever met. And a lot of them are still my friends to this day, who inspire me, who like I think support me in terms of my personal legend, you know? And they always had my back, and vice versa, you know, even like throughout the entire process of being a cheerleader for 2 years, and the hard things and the fun moments. And those are really good people. And I think people are the number one support in terms of all of us in our personal legends and personal journeys in life.
For sure. For sure. It's all about the village that we bring with us.
Yeah.
I love so many things you said. Callous Mind, by the way. Is that a David Goggins reference?
Yeah, it totally
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. I love Never Hurt. Can't hurt me, can't hurt me.
Yeah, it's a great book. Great book. I'm a big David Goggins guy. I love, quick sidebar, in that book, towards the end, he talks about how he has all these injuries and he hasn't been stretching. Mm-hmm. And he's just such a hard ass about stretching. He's like, I stretch 2 hours a day, motherfucker. Yeah. Just like, only you, David Goggins, could be so intense about something like self-care.
It is. But I like love it. And I appreciate it. And like a lot of what he says, like I almost found myself reading the book. I read that one on the beach show, pissed off. You know what I'm saying? Like I was reading and I was like, this is some bullshit. Like this is stupid. Like I don't agree. And then by the end of the book, I was like, okay, why do I have these feelings? And I was like, because I think I could be doing more in terms of like my own fitness or my own stretching or my own routines or my own life, you know? Like I read this other quote once and it was like, careful of what you're jealous of, because that's actually what you want. And I always tell this to people now, like I'll have a friend who will get upset about XYZ or say like, oh, so-and-so said this to me and it really made me upset and I was jealous, or like they get this. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a sign of what you want. You know, that's a sign that you're not taking the proactive action in your life for what you desire, truly. Not what you desire, not the promotion that everybody thinks you should get. I mean, what you want to be doing, you know? And so I really liked his book, but it didn't make me angry. Then I was like, okay, actually I'm using this as motivation, right? He's I think well above his years and time and really wise.
Definitely one of the people I turn to a lot for motivation. I want to hit on something you talked about, right? Because I had one of my questions that I had coming into this is, you do end up being an Eagles cheerleader though. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that there's some moments, there's some traditions, there's some images of being on the field at the link that are just ingrained in your psyche now, right? Mm-hmm. I've heard you say in the past that becoming an Eagles cheerleader made you realize you could do anything you put your mind to. So like, what are some of those images though, when you make it through the other side, that stick with you to this day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of like, you know, pinch me moments that have happened. Like I think one for me that really sticks out was I was part of the last ever swimsuit calendar. And I was really fortunate. I was like a month. I think I was September. It's so crazy. I don't even remember that now. But to me, it was like, you know, it was a big deal. Like I was a rookie at the time. And, you know, to go from like being told to like, oh, tone it up if you really want to make this team, to then like really working so hard and investing a lot of energy and time in myself. And like, you know, having that opportunity, like you asked me like, oh, when you were younger, what was your personal legend? Like, what was your belief that you would be? Like, I never thought that I would model or like be in any swimsuit calendar. And I loved modeling. Like I loved that side of it. I really became passionate about trying to want to do that at some point in my life, post Drexel, or while I was at Drexel. I researched the best agency in Philly, but you know, obviously could not do that simultaneously contractually with the Eagles, but knew that would be kind of like a next step, or like a hopefully an adventure for me to look forward to post being done with them. I knew I wasn't going to do Eagles forever. I knew I was not going to do it for as many years as you were allowed to do it. That was not my end goal. Again, doing that provided me the confidence, exposure to know that I was capable of kind of like venturing out on my own, which is my ultimate aspiration, hope, goal, whatever. And again, like met the most incredible friends. And so moments that stick out, like there were so many fun playoff games. There were so many times in the locker room, even like fun practices, the swimsuit calendar, traveling. I got to represent my team in Miami, but like, it wasn't necessarily like representing my team in Miami, or it wasn't those moments. It was the fact that like on that trip in particular, like my teammates voted for me to go, in lieu of a teammate who had an injury and couldn't go. So they put it to a squad vote. And the fact that 36 of my teammates voted for me to be the representative. The fact that my best friends to this day, like I was just in a wedding this past summer for my best friend, you know, who was over last night drinking wine at my house. And my other best friend whose wedding is in 2025, you know, like that I'm a bridesmaid in. Like those are the things that stick out in my mind, the relationships and the people and the lessons that I learned, more so than the moments. Because glitz and glam is fun and cool, but that's easily like, you can replicate that. Like that's the people are the things, and the lessons and experiences are the things that you like can't replace, you know?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. It's I had the opportunity to work at NESN, which is New England Sports Network, like the Boston Red Sox broadcast company, in my senior year internship co-op. And one of the coolest things was being on the field at Fenway Park, which is the oldest stadium in Major League Baseball, and like literally standing on the infield dirt or like being in the Green Monster and thinking like, oh my God, I'm really here right now.
Yeah.
And I would think about all the people who told me my whole life, even when I didn't believe it, that you were going to be on that field one day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. That didn't happen for a lot of reasons. We don't have to, but it was like the coolest thing to be able to be standing, like for me, on this place I dreamed of getting to. But to your point, it doesn't mean anything without the people who get you there. I do want to go in a different direction real quick, though, based on something you did say, which is that you're very, trying to be independent. You're trying to do a lot of things. And something that caught my attention, I've heard you mention a number of times on your podcast, you're trying to write a book. And that a central story in the book is going to be that 4-month process of trying out for the Eagles. But for you, right, like what's been the inspiration to write a book, and what's that process looking like? I know I want to write a book too. I haven't even started. So what are you conceptualizing right now? Maybe don't spoil too much if you don't want to.
No, I'm happy to share. I mean, it's tough, right? Like first of all, anybody who's written a book, kudos. Like, and I need the tips of how you focus, because you get so distracted and it's so hard. So I think like when I was in college, like my outlet, again, I'm a performer, I'm a creative person by nature. That's really how I would like identify myself first and foremost, at like a very molecular level. And so in college, like whenever I would go through something or, be upset, happy, like, I've had like my aunt passed when I was in college of breast cancer, I would write. And so I have so many, and I like, so silly when I think about it now, but like I titled the document in my computer at Drexel as like novel 1.1, right? And then it would evolve to like 1.2 and whatever. And I have this collection of stories and metaphors and analogies that like I just authored when they were relevant to my experiences. And so what that is like a hodgepodge of a lot of random shit, frankly, right? But that is weaved in terms of like a lot of the experiences that I went through that are really relevant to lessons that I learned, I think, in my young, like, adolescent years or like, 18 to 30 years. And so like, I don't know that it's necessarily like ready to be published, or I don't know that it's ready to be formulated. Like I've tried to sit down and write like stories of like breakups or stories of like chapter changes or like Eagles, and it's difficult for me to like sit down and write literally, so I think that like that part will probably come next, like the trying to actually share like the recounting of like events that were really monumental for me. But a lot of what I have is a little bit more abstract and expressive that symbolizes these different experiences. But yeah, I think it will probably be a combination of both things. And, at the end of the day, like what I hope to share is just a lot of the story around like what people told me I could and couldn't do and how I combated that and or rose above and or like I'm using that to try to get to where I want to be. And I'm not even close to where I want to be yet. But like I've also realized and I think matured in the sense where I used to say like, oh, I won't do XYZ until I'm XYZ place in my life, right? Like you can't necessarily benchmark your life like that, because you're never going to really derive satisfaction out of where you are. And so in the meantime, like I'll keep sharing my story these types of ways, like I'll keep hoping to inspire people with my stories, through my own podcast, my own journey, my Instagram. Like I feel like I try to be transparent on all these different channels and platforms, because that's the point of life, right? Like if we're not being honest with others and ourselves, like who and what are you living for? So yeah, it's definitely something. And, like I want it to be called This Blonde Means Business. Like I want to keep embracing that persona. Like, I very vulnerably, like I tried out for Miss Philadelphia 2 years ago at this point, and I didn't necessarily know if that was like the right path for me. I didn't necessarily know if it was a place that I fit or would have to, again, like change myself to be a part of. And I didn't end up winning. I got like runner up or something. I don't even remember. But like I remember the onstage host, who's a very well-known Philadelphia host, kept almost like mocking, like, oh, This Blonde Means Business, which I was using as like my social impact platform. And I was like, you know what? Like, keep laughing at it, keep mocking it, because like, this is who I am. I'm embracing who I am. I'm embracing the fact that like people like you don't understand that you can do and be it all. And I'm trying to set that forth, right, via an example and by sharing and giving a platform to other people's stories as well. And I think especially as women, like that's a really unique component of it, So yeah, I'm going to keep doing that. Again, like I have a lot of ways in which I want this brand or platform to grow. And I think a book is definitely a way in which I want it all on paper one day. So we'll see when that happens, but definitely bucket list.
One of the songs I was listening to on my drive, I'm a big Whitney Houston fan. I used to listen to Whitney Houston. She, my mom had the CD. I forget the name of the album. It came out in 2009, right before she passed. And the song I was listening to was Nothing But Love. And it's a song about how she has nothing but love for all the people in her life, including the people who've hated on her and told her she couldn't do things. And I think there's such power to acknowledging that there are people who are going to tell you can't do things and that you can still have love for them and that they serve a purpose in your life. So,
I even think like more love than I have had for those people than the people, or more love for the people who've hurt me than love for the people who I love in my life. Like not maybe, but like maybe more admiration or respect, because that prompts you to act. You know what I'm saying? Like even like The Alchemist, right? At the end, like, I mean, spoiler alert, if you haven't read The Alchemist, maybe shut the episode off.
Yeah, I say it all the time. The spoiler alert, you got to read the book if you're listening to this podcast, for sure.
You know, like Santiago would never have found the treasure had he not gotten beaten up by the robbers and had the near-death experience, right?
Yeah.
Like,
or how about even his friend, the crystal merchant, who'd given up on his dream?
Yeah.
If he'd just taken from that example, he wouldn't have done anything.
Yeah.
So. No, I really love the conversation we're having. We do have to take a break here, so we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. We got Natasha Filipov, in studio. It's been an awesome episode so far. Today's podcast is brought to you by Greenhouse Recording Studio. Greenhouse Recording Studio is a proud partner of Follow the Omens. Located in Lyndhurst, New Jersey, Greenhouse Recording Studio is New Jersey's premier recording studio and is made by artists for artists. For booking, call 908-242-4283. Again, that's 908-242-4283. I'm back with Natasha Filipov. Natasha, having a great conversation so far. I want to pick up where we left off before our break, and you were talking a little bit about, starting your podcast. So I want to go through that journey. This Blonde Means Business starts as a TEDx talk, right?
Yep.
So take me back to before that happens, how that opportunity comes about for you.
Yeah, sure. So came about, or I think I sought it out, honestly. I'd heard about TEDx and I was like, oh, you should do TEDx. And, we do this thing at Drexel every year. And I kind of kept my sights on it, kept kind of just abreast of like the application process, and applied, shelled out my idea. Again, like at the time I was taking a digital publishing class. It's like a required comms course for my minor. And within this class, you had to create a blog. Right. And I always wanted to create something. Like I was always passionate about having something of my own, whether that be like my full-time revenue stream or just like something that I did. Like that autonomy to me is an entrepreneurship or being an entrepreneurial person, I think is like something that definitely resonates with me. And so having to just create something of my own really excited me. Again, like the time that I was at in my life, had just started NFL cheerleading, and that was like a big change up and like lesson in and of itself. And then, I had just quit my first co-op, which was in finance. And I just changed my major, realizing that like that was not the journey for me. That was not my personal legend, right? And went to do like nonprofit work. Amazing experience, but again, like not necessarily where I wanted to stay forever. Pivoted back into like corporate America, like very corporate, working in like the corporate department of the largest corporation at the time, like, in the area, and was dealing with a lot of like those lessons that come with that and seeing that world. And I think people tried to really put me in a box at that point in my life where I was feeling that way, that I could only be like sexy at this point in time, or, like pretty at this point in time, or intelligent at this point in time, or like all these different roles in which I was trying to be, like that I really enjoyed, like modeling and dancing and expressing and writing, and then being like a little bit more of like, again, like a stickler for like the compliance side, and being like into corporate and like kind of more of like the dorky dweeby stuff. Like all of that I think was not digestible for people at certain times. And I had a real issue with that because, again, like I had learned the year prior that I was not putting myself where people didn't value me and or accept me for who I was and what I brought to the table, meaning all of those different components, all of my identities, all of my roles, all of my passions, all of my skill sets, period, right? Like I'm not going to objectify myself or things one by one to categorize them to fit into boxes. And so that was kind of like where I'd said I wanted to create a blog and or platform for people, professional people, or like college students, young people in general. That was kind of exemplifying that, right? Like, and also being okay with the fact that we don't know what our journeys are, and like that career exploration and personal and professional development and exploration should just be encouraged and supported by those around you and by resources. It wasn't supposed to be like Forbes or Bloomberg or anything that was super academic in that way. It was just supposed to be kind of like a source of inspiration and education. And so my professor at the time of this class was like, oh, why don't you call it This Blonde Means Business? And I loved that title because to me it meant like, it was the juxtaposition of obviously being this like blonde, you know, in business, but then also I think for me, it was meaning business in every aspect of your life. And that's how the brand has evolved. Now it's not what it was, where I think it was a lot of like when I was in college, like, you know, I was writing posts about courses and internships. And now I think I share more stories because that's who I am. Right. And so like now I always say like This Blonde Means Business. And the other like subhead tagline that has been developed since then is like, and my business is empowering your personal and professional brand, which is what I hope to do through what I do, you know. But at the time, it was just this blog that then became a TEDx talk that then I, you know, wanted to make into a podcast and YouTube, and just started interviewing people, started asking people, like largely successful people who I really looked up to and admired. Like, you know, there was this one franchise owner, a very successful fitness chain. She went to Penn Law School, like successful entrepreneur, like kind person first and foremost, you know. And like remember thinking to myself as like a junior in college, like, why would she ever be on my podcast? You know, which is like not professionally vetted, like not professional, like not a business, like not, and I'm not paying her to do it. And she was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And like having her on the podcast and having her share her story, and like the more people that I kept asking, and the amount of people who were professionals who like had livelihoods with their own businesses and ideas that trusted me to share their stories, that made an impact on me. And that was something that I like really loved and appreciated and found value in. And like, to me, like, you know, I always say this, I hope the podcast grows in terms of scale and enterprise and success and audience. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't, I am feeling fulfilled by giving people the opportunity to have a conversation and have people listen to that. And potentially, even if one person derives an ounce of inspiration out of anything I've said across like the nearly 50 episodes I've done over how many years, and or like the blog, you know, pieces that I've written, or the articles that have been contributor pieces, or like anything that my brand has touched, the presentations that I've given, or like the podcast that I do, like that to me is worthwhile and worth it. And yeah, it's just something that I'm passionate about and I love, and I want to continue growing it.
Well, obviously you talk a lot about the value you want to bring with your podcast, but as you look back on doing that for the last 2 years, how have you changed, right? What have you learned? Maybe not just in the process of doing it. Obviously, there's a lot of skills that go into it. And we were having that conversation beforehand, all the frustrations and challenges, but also having so many guests on over the years, you have to have learned like so many things from those people you've talked to.
Yeah.
Right? So talk to me about those ups and downs of throwing yourself into the deep end, right? Not knowing how to swim, the challenges and all the things that are difficult about it, but also the things that you learn along the way that you weren't expecting to learn.
Yeah, you know, I think the biggest things that I've learned are, one, just how many people resonate with the mission of what I'm trying to do. As in, like, you know, they've been told that they can't do X, Y, Z, or that they shouldn't have executed whatever business decision, or that they shouldn't be operating this way, or that because they were a female that they wouldn't be successful in. And hearing those types of stories have obviously been super inspirational to me, one. Two, and I think this is the bigger lesson, the more impactful one, as again, like I'm growing in terms of like my life, my career, what I want. It's around that idea of a personal legend. You know, like I interview mainly entrepreneurs, but other people as well who just share their journeys. And like for the most part, everyone who I interview is doing their dream job. Like, and that is so neat to me, to have the privilege to hear about what makes someone tick and why. And that's the reason I started it, because again, it was the inspiration of story sharing and hearing about people's why. Because if you don't have a why, how do you get out of bed every day? Like, you might get out of bed every day to make a salary to live, but like, is that living, or is that really like going through the motions of life? And so I think being inspired by people who've taken risks, who've done, you know, what is not the easy path. A lot of them entrepreneurs, again, who work 7 days a week. Some of them, they're following their personal legend, to go back to like the Alchemist and to circle back to this theme of like, you know, your dreams and what you want. And in a lot of ways, like, you know, just to be totally transparent and frank and vulnerable on the podcast, like I've sometimes felt like an imposter listening to them, because there are certain risks that I want to take that I haven't taken yet, because either I feel like it's not the right time, because my own fear gets to me, because other people's opinions have gotten in my head. And that's something that like every day I combat, and I'm like, you know, setting boundaries and getting stronger at listening to my own voice and my own like soul, and like, you know, being connected to nature and what I believe is like meant for me. That's been the most inspiring thing. That's been the most impactful, inspiring thing. And the biggest lesson I've learned is just like, the motivation to start going for what I want more in my life, in every facet of my life, not just professionally, not just personally, but like, what are your dreams and how do you reach them without the fear of other people's opinions stopping you from doing what you want? That's something that they teach me every day, and that's something that the people around me teach me. And that's, again, like to your point about a village, I think the most important part.
I hear you, and I want to mirror back to you, right? Like those feelings of the imposter syndrome, like, oh my God, am I doing enough? I think anybody who takes on a creative or entrepreneurial venture has those experiences. And Steve Jobs is someone whose material I always go back to, and he's got a lecture I listen to a lot. It's 15 minutes long, just different quotes of him at different meetings. And one of the quotes he has is that if you're going to do this, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of long hours. It's a lot of difficult moments sitting with yourself and saying, how the fuck am I going to make this happen?
Yeah, not the easy path.
Not at all. So you've really got to love what you're doing, because otherwise you're not going to get it done. He says, I believe half of getting through to the other end is really liking what you do and being able to show up consistently. I think there's something to that. So I want to acknowledge and appreciate that you're inspiring me right now to like stay on this course with this podcast, with other ventures. And that's what it's all about. It's having this energy to pursue the things that you find meaning in. And a big part of my life, and we were kind of talking about this too, I want to get into it, is this idea of manifestation, right? Like I was showing you in my book, The Alchemist, I have a note card with 2 goals, right? It's what I want to do with my life. Number 1, I want to produce movies because I want to tell stories. Number 2, I want to interview influential people. I'm doing one of those 2 things right now, right? So, but that's the goal, right? I'm a storyteller at heart. I got into announcing when I was at college. I was a writer. I want to tell stories because I believe stories have the power to change the world. And everything I want to manifest is making the world a better place by storytelling. So for you though, right, with the power of manifestation, what are you putting out there? What do you really believe that you bring to the table and the changes you want to make in life with your manifestations?
Yeah, that's a big question. And with a lot to follow it up with. So that's like, hard to follow. That you just inspired me a lot. But no, I think for me, it's manifesting the idea that you can follow your personal legend and believe in yourself, regardless of your circumstance or what people tell you can and can't do, regardless of the opinions of yourself that are thrust upon you. I feel like, again, that was something that I experienced my entire life. These projections or stereotypes or contradictions of what I could and could not be. And I think that stifled a lot of who I wanted to be when I was younger. And so I think for me, it's a lot of like the unlearning of that and proving to people that like you can do and be it all. You can follow your dreams. You can take the hard path. You can be successful in it. And you can define your own success, right? Like I give this piece of advice, and I gave it over and over again when I would speak to panels at Drexel University to the students, but I think, and it's relevant there, but I think it's a larger metaphor for life. I would always tell these students, like, don't get caught in the Drexel dryer. And I would get these stares like, what the F is our guest speaker okay in the head today? Like she's psycho. I
don't know what that means. I've never heard that term.
So what I meant by that is I told them like, oftentimes you're in this cohort with people. And I think, again, this is a small like example of what I would tell these students, but it's a bigger example for life. You're in a group where you come in, you're a freshman in college, and you're looking around you in the huge, let's say, lecture hall of like, 200 people. Out of those 200 people, you're thinking to yourself that those people are your competition, right? Co-op season, internship season, you will be competing with them for these roles that are highly coveted, that are the same roles that get posted every 6 months, typically, like the San Fran finance, PWM, private wealth management co-op, at least in business school, right? Or the Comcast marketing internship. And while the finance and the marketing kid are not necessarily going to compete directly, they're still viewing each other on that day one as competitors. And so they're entering the wash cycle together, right? They are starting the process of learning and kind of going through that process as the same, on the same playing field. Don't get caught in the dryer. Don't shrink yourself, okay, to fit the internships that exist in the book, in the bill. What is standard? The, Comcast marketing co-op, the San Fran PWM management co-op, or even just the greater opportunities at Drexel. Like, there are other opportunities that are out there in life if you have the courage to remove yourself and put yourself where you may not fit, or to plug yourself into a different area or arena. And I just think like that was something that I did in college. Like I followed the rinse repeat cycle that I was expected to do. I thought I was going to be that like San Fran finance co-op, even though I knew it didn't align with like my personal talents and God-given like gifts and abilities and interests. And I felt like I was shrinking. Like I really did. Like I felt like a sock that was in the dryer. And so, I tell this story to students all the time. And again, like I get these crazy stares, but by the end of it, they kind of like, I see their heads nodding, and I see some of them in the audience like really taking this in, because again, in life, like so many people get stuck in the cycle of like they're just doing what the masses are doing. And I think it is like the individualistic people who are like the creative thinkers, who are the fearless ones, who are the most successful because they don't follow what everyone else is doing. You know, like there's this, I listen to motivational like speeches sometimes when I run like a psychomaniac.
Hey, we're on the same vibe there.
I love it. Great.
I have David Goggins mixes with the songs and his motivation. But I also listen to like some commencements. Yeah, I'll send you some.
The one is about, it's called the lion attitude. And it says a sheep follows, and it's something that says something to the effect of like a sheep follows and is often being led to the slaughterhouse without even knowing it. But like a lion stands up, and a lion defines his own path, and other animals then follow in his path, right? Like he is a leader. And so like that is the same idea of like you have to kind of define your own success, and you have to define your own path in life, and that's your personal legend. Like it's not always like carved out for you, you know?
Well, listen, I love big lion guy. Love The Lion King. My favorite movie. No, for real.
It's a great movie. It's a great movie.
So I have like a tiny little Simba doll like in my room still. I swear I do from when I was a little kid. But no, I love you touched on so many things there. Like it unlocks so many, like I connected with a lot of what you said there. I mean, I look back, and in my time at Drexel, I can relate to thinking I needed to get a paid co-op, and then going into my junior year and NESN, I was applying. I got through their last cycle, and at the last minute in C round, which is like right before you have to have a co-op, they said no, like you're qualified, but we chose somebody else. And I was devastated, and I had to work an unpaid co-op interning. This is before Eric, who's producing our show, was even there. I was working for a guy named Jeff McDevitt, and I was doing a 20-hour unpaid internship at Drexel Athletic Videos, like for the athletic department. And I worked 60 hours a week because I wanted to grow the skills, and I was so upset that I didn't get the job that I wanted, that I wanted to prove to them the next time I applied that they had made a mistake in not picking me. And I worked at Mad Greeks, which was a pizza place, to just make enough money to get by that summer. But I really put in the time doing something that wasn't giving me any money, but it was fulfilling me. I was stretching my skills. I was learning how to edit. I was learning how to shoot. I was announcing games. And I look back and I'm like, man, I'm really grateful that even though it wasn't profitable, even though it wasn't this job that people probably looked at and had a lot of prestige, that set me up for so many things that I have now in my life. And I ended up getting that NESN internship.
And those skills then helped you in your future and now. That reminds me, we're talking about manifestation, and not to hop or get ahead of subjects here, but I think vision boarding is a large part of that.
I was just going to ask you, so please. Yeah.
On my vision board, so I'm big into this. Like I do one typically at least once a year, if not more. I love doing them. They always turn out like really pretty, not even to sound like that, but I typically do end up like putting them aesthetically somewhere. I have them on my desk normally, like as even like a mouse pad that I can use, or like a laptop pad. That way, every time I'm looking down at my work, I'm reminded of what my goals are, of what I want in my life. And they're consciously visible to me. You know what I'm saying? They're at the forefront of my thought process every single day. And one of the things that I had put on my first ever vision board was a quote about what you're exactly referring to. And it said something to the effect of, and I found it in a random magazine clipping. I have no clue who said it. I have no clue what the full context was, but it says something to the effect of like, even if it's not super profitable, it feels really good to come to work every day. And that to me is like, period. Like if you're not in a place in your life, professionally, personally, whatever, where like at the end of the day, it feels good, what is the purpose of what you're doing? So
I think the power of this book and the message in it is that was the next question. I was going to ask you. So this quote, exactly what you just said, right? Like even if it's not super profitable, it feels good. But we're just on such a vibe, and that's what this book does, right? And it's super fascinating. That concept of a vision board. I've got mine here, and I'll show it to you after the show. I don't have to occupy that this time. It's all about you. It's all about you. But like, where did you first get that concept of using a vision board?
I don't know. I actually don't know. I want to credit it to my really great friend, family friend, best friend's mom, Stacy McGuigan, actually. She was big into this, and she referred me to a journal. This was right after I went through like a really rough breakup. It was called the JMB Living Journal, and she has her own company. Look it up. Like it's great. JMB Living. I'll plug it here. I plug it on my personal, This Blonde Means Business page sometimes as well. But, within that journal, and every day it's essentially like, daily like gratitude journal, and it gives you prompts like, what did you do today to get you closer to your dreams? Like, what's one thing that you could have done to get you closer to your dreams today? Or like, how did you make progress? What were you grateful for? Like, where did you see gratitude in your life? Whatever. And it asks you all these questions every day, And at the beginning of each journal for the season, you have to vision board. It's like an assignment, And so I think it might have started there. But I like I said, I like to do it at the turn of the new year. I think that's a great time to evaluate like what you want for the year. And what's interesting about my vision boards over the years is like, they haven't changed. Like They literally have not, they may evolve slightly, but like if I were to compare year 1 to year 2 to what was in the journal, like they're pretty similar, which again, to me, I think validates and verifies that I know what I'm meant to do. And it's up to me to either pursue that or not. Right. And that's what I think, like, again, speaking in terms of like the Alchemist and greater themes, like that's what each of us either decides to live our life the way we want to live it or the way in which we think it should be lived. And so, you know, that's again what I hope to manifest, is encouraging people to follow option A.
I love it. And I want to, we're getting close to wrapping here, but I want to ask a couple questions. Before I get to the wrap-up questions, though, I did have one more. I came across this phrase. I really liked it. You've used this phrase in the past: transferable determination.
When did I use it?
It was on one of your podcasts.
Okay.
And I guess, wow, so there you go. You don't even remember it. No, I was going to ask you, what does that mean, right? Can you elaborate on it? Because when I heard it, I was like, I like that concept. And I could see how you're somebody who's very multifaceted in your career interests. And the determination from one experience could be a carryover doing it.
Yeah.
That was my impression. I just wanted to see if you remember that, that
just
phrase.
in thinking about like probably the context in which I used it, like I've always had to be gritty. Like I've always had to be resourceful in terms of whatever I wanted, you know, like things didn't necessarily, like you said, like, oh, how did that TEDx talk fall? Like, how did it come to you? Nothing that no opportunity that I've ever had actually that I can think of has come to me. I've always sought it out, actually. So like, you know, I was on this program called Reporters Roundtable with PBS in college. That was a really defining moment for me. I love being on air. I love being behind the camera. Eagles, I sought out. Dance team in college, I sought out. College, the college that I wanted and the program that I wanted, I sought out. Like everything, you know, modeling, post Eagles, I sought out the resources and the connections to get into the agency. Like, you know, or even like would shoot with photographers. Like certain things, yes, Omens, I think would come to me that would support that these things were right, you know, for my path and for my journey. But at the end of the day, like I have always had the determination to go after what I want. Like I've known that like whatever I wanted, it's up to me to get, you know, like, and that's the other thing I think too, like there was a quote, and I'm again paraphrasing, but it was something in this book about like the universe conspires to help people who know what they want. And you have to know what you want. Like even at a very small level, even as a next step, you know, like I knew I wanted to get into a modeling agency. I knew I wanted to be represented. Right. And so like, I had to go after that. Like I had to chase that. And I think it's about that idea of like transferable determination. It doesn't matter what you want to do. You just have to have the grit and gravitas and kind of courage. And these are all themes within this book too. And there is a quote in this book, like get up or fall 7 times and get up, you know, 8, like whatever it is, you just have to keep going. You have to be determined in terms of what you want. And you have to be prepared for a lot of no's, for a lot of obstacles, you know, and for a lot of disappointment. That will ultimately lead you, I think, to this journey of self-discovery, which is, again, just the point of the whole book here.
I love what you unlocked there, because it brings to mind a Jim Carrey quote on the concept of, like, you got to be clear about what you want. He has a quote in his commencement speech at the Maharishi Mahesh School where he says, as far as I can tell, success in life is about letting the universe know what you want. So you're letting the universe know what you want and then working towards it without worrying about how it comes to pass.
Yeah, I love that.
Right. So like that's what you
and that's manifestation and vision boarding, and you put it out there, right?
Right.
With the expectation that if it's meant for you, like I always say, like, and this is another quote I love, like if it's meant for you, it won't pass you by. You know, and it's not necessarily up to me to capture at what point that comes to me or at what time, and if it works out and how it works out in the logistics, what you're saying, but that just if it's meant to happen, it will, and I'm going to have faith that it will, and trust that if it's meant for me, it'll be meant for me.
There's so many beautiful lessons in this book, so many ways we could keep talking about it. But I want to talk about this concept. Santiago goes on this amazing journey. He gets all the way to the pyramids. He gets beat up there, and then he travels all the way home to find the gold was buried in his backyard the whole time. So the real treasure wasn't the gold. The real treasure was everything he got to see on his journey. As you look back, right, on things that you pursued, thinking that once you got it, it'd make you happy. But it really didn't, because I think that's a universal experience. We all have those experiences. What are some of those things, though, that you got to see on your journey you weren't expecting, that as you look back on now, you're like, man, as challenging as it was to go through some of the things I went through, I'm happy I did, because I wouldn't have seen this thing had I not gone through that.
Yeah, gosh, that's a great and fantastic question. And I'd love for you to even answer the same too, to share, just like to hear. But I think for me, again, it was like the journey itself and the people that I have met along the journey and hearing about their journeys and getting inspired again by like their story sharing and the experiences. And I think it's also for me, like the thing I have the most gratitude for is probably the faith in knowing that I'm capable of what I want to do in my life. You know, like that's something that keeps me going and inspires me every day. And that was instilled in me through the people who I've met on the journey, you know, at multiple stages. Like when I quit this finance internship when I was 18 years old, because I was getting treated like shit, frankly, because I hated my life. I was so miserable every single day, and went into this like random nonprofit, which was just like the only option I had, frankly, to fulfill this Drexel co-op requirement and stay in college at the time, right? Pretty much. The people who were the most supportive, kind, caring individuals who taught me so much about, one, professionalism, two, like, yes, logistics related to like the nonprofit world and marketing and communications coordination, etc. But like just the faith that they had in me, not knowing me, or like how good they were fundamentally, or even like, you know, I was always asked like, oh, when you're on the Eagles, were like the girls bitchy or mean? Like I have some of my best friends from that experience. The colleagues from Drexel that I have made, the business friends, you know, random like individuals through different work experiences I've had, strangers that I've met, who I've interviewed for my podcast, which was a concept that in my head one day that became a show that now I have friends from. You know, like those are the things to me that are the treasure, right? Like those lessons and people and experiences. Again, I said it, so now I'm being redundant, but those are the things that you can't replicate or replace nor predict. So again, like trusting that everything that is meant to come to you will come to you in time. But I've learned too, at the same time, this might be part of the treasure as well, to trust where I'm at is where I'm meant to be and is like good enough for the time being, and to enjoy the moment.
That's all very well said. And I want to ask one final question before I get into some more books. I want to talk to you about books and then we'll wrap it. But on this topic, now that, you know, you've read The Alchemist and we're on this, having this conversation, what's your present, right? You've got your treasure. You've gone on your journey. You've come all the way back, right? What are you trying to do in your present right now?
Yeah, I want to be honest with you. I don't think I found the treasure yet. I don't think I found the treasure yet. I think right now I'm probably like in the oasis stage with like a lot more traveling to the pyramids and back to go. You know, I mean that literally and figuratively. Like I love this area. I love travel. It's really important to me. There's a lot of different professional experiences that I want. I don't want to do the same thing for the rest of my life. I kind of picture myself doing a few other things before I settle, quote unquote. You know, I think like finding love on the journey. That's something that's on my vision board that I visualize and dream of. I think, you know, for me, continuing to inspire others and be creative is something that I hope to do. So living in the present is like, again, like all of these things that you mentioned I am, or all these things that I do. For me, it's a lot of like continuing my own self-discovery along the journey and doing these things. Like, you know, I'm proud of where I am, but like professionally, my eyes are always open. I think anyone should always be exploring kind of what their next step could be, and just having the awareness to be inspired by something that could come your way. You know, I definitely want to be more on air. Like I definitely want to continue growing my podcast, taking risks, not being as afraid, being more fearless, saying no more, so I can make room to say yes to other things that are more meant for me or more fulfilling. There's a lot of self-discovery, and there's a lot of the journey that I still want to make and take. And so I think that is the present for me, is living in the moment to experience all that. And I think that's what the next 5 years for me are really going to be about. In addition to, I feel like, and the book referenced this at one point, it's a critical time for me to either realize my personal legend or not. And so like I every day want to wake up and question myself and challenge myself. Like, how am I doing that today? How am I getting myself one step closer? And if I'm not, what can I do tomorrow? And I think that's like the best thing for everyone to do in life.
I love it. I want to leave on asking you, you know, because this book has done so much for me. I'm sure it's done a lot for you. What are a couple other books that have had a similar level of impact in your life that you would gift to somebody who's trying, you know, in the beginning stages of their personal development, that you'd say, hey, read this, and I think you'd get a lot out of it?
Yeah. Start With Why by Simon Sinek. I recommend to everybody. It's probably one of my favorite books ever. I just think, again, that question of like, what pulls you out of bed every day? Like if you don't have some type of passion about either the people you're with or the reason that you're doing what you're doing in life, you know, like there has to be some type of motivation. And so that book I think is really great at jumpstarting and kickstarting somebody's own kind of journey in that way. Two, this is just like a classic, another literary classic. Like they have you read this in school, like, you know, in 5th grade, but I love the book To Kill a Mockingbird. I think it just speaks so much to, and even like issues that are happening now in our world, like racially and geopolitically and politically. Like I just think that book everybody should read as an example of how to be a person of integrity, like, and how to just carry forth the idea that like you should have love and respect for everybody in the world, regardless of what your opinions are. Love that book. And two, or what was this? Three, I think Atomic Habits is another really good one. So, you know, that's a little bit more, I think, tangential, with also some specific examples as to like how you can kind of kickstart the life you want to live. And so I would really cite that as another great example too.
I love it. That's a good list right there.
Yeah.
I've read 2 of the 3. I'm not going to disclose which one.
Okay, I was going to ask you. All right.
I'll leave that for all the podcast. But no, Natasha, this has been fun. It's been a great conversation. It really
so much
is.
fun.
And I'm going to take this and this is going to energize me going into my next week at work. So I really appreciate you for coming on and just being an awesome guest. Before we get going though, tell the people, right? You got a lot going on in your life. So where can people find more out about you? If you want to talk directly into that camera right there, well, roll out the red carpet for you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that. Thank you for having me on. This was fantastic. I think what you're doing with Follow the Omens and all of the other projects that you have going for you are so exciting, and I can't wait to continue following them. If you'd like to continue following me and all of my projects, I will plug This Blonde Means Business on Instagram, on every standard streaming platform, on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, pretty much any social media platform, we are there. And my personal Natasha_Filipov, just my name, Natasha Filipov. I'm on, again, mostly everything for the time being. So, yeah.
Well, that's a wrap. Remember, keep following the Omens. We'll see you for the next episode.